Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Fan Disaster. This is Battlefield 1. In today's weapon review, we'll be taking a closer look at the Madsen MG Storm LMG, of course exclusively available to the support class in Battlefield 1. We'll be taking a close look at its stats, its properties, how it performs on the battlefield, and of course how it compares to some of the other available LMGs in Battlefield 1. Starting off then with the stats of the weapon in question, as we always do, the Madsen MG Storm comes with a maximum damage of 23 and a minimum damage of 17.5, making this a guaranteed 5-shot kill all the way out to 30 meters, from which point onwards you're going to be requiring 6 bullets to down your target. The fire rate of the weapon at 540 rounds per minute is relatively high for the LMG category, that is only beat out by the BAR at 600 rounds per minute, and followed up of course by the MG15 at 500 rounds per minute. What this means is that this weapon essentially is very flexible in its damage output. It's capable of dealing decent damage in close quarter, decent damage in medium range, longest range, well, as decent as any weapon really would be that is not a DMR or sniper rifle. We are of course not playing Battlefield 4 here, where we can simply use a SAR-21 to snipe people at 100 meters. Moving on to, I'd say, a special quality of this weapon, the muzzle velocity at 800 meters per second. This thing is shooting its bullets out pretty much as fast as your average sniper rifle is in Battlefield 1, which is pretty impressive. This essentially means is that when you're shooting those medium long range targets, you're not going to have to lead too much, and more generally the weapon feels relatively responsive, snappy in the way it acts. In other words, you pull the trigger, you see the hit markers. It's a pretty fast thing, and it's always nice to have a higher muzzle velocity. It certainly doesn't harm the performance of this weapon in any situation. The magazine size of it is standard, that's at 31 bullets, familiar to those of you who play more modern day FPS first person shooters. However, it's not the biggest amongst the MG categories. For a matter of fact, it's one of the smaller ones. Then again, the MGs in this game seem to all have relatively small magazines. Maybe the upcoming They Shall Not Pass DLC will introduce a few more larger magazined LMGs for us to play around with. Next up then we have the reload times at 2.65 seconds. The short reload is relatively alright for close quarter situations. It keeps the weapon on its flexible toes. However, the long reload at 4.2 seconds is pretty bad. So if you possibly can avoid running out of bullets with this, or at least leaving one bullet in your magazine chamber to avoid that longer reload if you're in close quarter situations, because you may get yourself killed with a 4.2 second reload. Moving on then to the recall of the Madsen MG Storm, it was of course recently nerfed in the winter patch, getting a little bit more recall. Nevertheless, the Storm variant still maintains a relatively good figure, is easy to control, and anybody who's played any kind of first person shooter, at least in my experience, shouldn't have too much trouble with it. It's got a vertical recall of 0.266 and recall to the left and right, that is horizontal, of 0.24. Its first shot recall multiplier 1.9 is noticeable, nevertheless definitely easily manageable given that your base vertical recall is low in the first place. The accuracy of the weapon in question here is standard for an LMG with an ADS, starting ADS that is to say, at 0.24. What makes this weapon nice to use is that you can also strafe while shooting all the way out to medium ranges, I'd argue, with an ADS of 0.56. That's not too bad, and its hipfire is relatively good if you refrain from using it at anything but close quarter. At 2, its accuracy should be sufficient for anything I'd say under 10 meters when relative comfortable hip firing. With that being said then, let's move on to the more analytical part of this video, where we talk about this weapon's comparative performance, some of the difficulties, and how it stacks up to some of the other LMGs specifically in the game. Well, the Madsen MG has one bigger disadvantage. While it's pretty cool that the magazine is loaded on the top of the gun, and it is of course historically accurate, it is a little bit of a nuisance when it comes to trying to figure out where everything and everybody is on the battlefield. It essentially blocks quite a significant part of your screen and can make target acquisition a little bit more difficult. However, in my experience in using this gun quite significantly over the last few days, it's a matter of getting used to it. After using this gun for a little bit, it doesn't actually bother me that much, and I just learned to deal with the fact that I have to pay a little bit more attention to maybe my right side, because I may not instantly see anybody who's there because they could be hiding behind my magazine. On the other hand though, this weapon is one of the more balanced ones. Now, we've talked about the Ace 23 of Battlefield 1 many times before. We've talked about whether this was the MG15, whether it was the BAR, and I'd argue that this gun is equally a candidate for that role, simply because at 540 rounds per minute, its damage output is on par with the lower end of the assault weapons, most namely of course the MP18, It can't keep up with the close quarter specialist of the shotguns or the Automatico. It's not quite on par either with the Hellriegel, but it does good damage, and if you're the first to shoot, anybody but an Automatico should go down if you're using this weapon. It's also relatively good at medium-long range, that is to say for an automatic weapon, which is a few and far between, at least in my opinion, in this game, and it's nice to have an automatic weapon that can deal with targets at medium range, opposed to only the DMRs that are usable at this range usually. This is of course a characteristic of the LMG category. The MG15 and BAR share these similar traits, however what makes this weapon special I guess is its muzzle velocity, whereas the BAR has its higher fire rate and the MG15 has its larger magazine. Ultimately, probably the other two are better choices when it comes to their special ability, but you should take into account that the Madsen also shoots faster than say the MG15. Can it top the BAR when it comes to performance? It's difficult to say. It has a larger magazine here again, and you can probably do a very good comparison between these three weapons and which is the best for your all-round combat. If you want to see that, let me know down below in the comments, by the way. I, for my part, at least enjoy the Madsen MG Storm. It's a flexible gun. It's a gun I can use in Conquest, in Operations, in Rush, Domination, you name the game mode, you can use the gun, unless you're talking, of course, about Foul Fortress on Conquest. This is one of those maps where it's sniper rifle only. With that being said, then, I definitely recommend you try out the Madsen MG Storm. Let me know down below in the comments what you'd like to see regarding future video suggestions, and of course your experiences with the Madsen MG Storm. Have you found it a easy to use weapon? Has the magazine in the middle of your screen been just too bothersome and you haven't really been able to get comfortable with the weapon? Leave all that as per usual down below in the comments. And with all that being said, then I'd like to thank you of course very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.